اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم إني أسألك برحمتك التي وسعت كل شيء وبقوتك التي قهرت بها كل شيء وخضع لها كل شيء وضللها كل شيء وبجبروتك التي غلبت بها كل شيء وبعزتك التي لا يقوم لها شيء وبعزمتك التي ملأت كل شيء وبسلطانك الذي على كل شيء وبوجهك الباقي بعد فناء كل شيء وبأسمائك التي ملأت أركان كل شيء وبعلمك الذي أحاط بكل شيء وبنور وجهك الذي أعطى له كل شيء يا نور يا قدوس يا نور يا قدوس يا نور يا قدوس يا أول الأولين ويا آخر الآخرين. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تحتك العصام. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تنزل النقام. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تغير النعم. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تحبس الدعاء. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تقطع الرجاء. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تنزل البلاء. اللهم اغفر لي كل ذنب أذنبته وكل خطيئة أخطأتها. اللهم إني أتقرب إليك بذكرك وأستشفع بك إلى نفسك وأسألك بجودك أن تدنيني من قربك وأن توزعني شكرك. وأن تلهمني ذكرك. اللهم إني أسألك صوال خاضعا متذللا خاشعا تسامحني وترحمني وتجعلني بقسمك راضعا قانع وفي جميع الأحوال متواضعا. اللهم وأسألك صوال يوم اشتدت فاقته وأنزل بك عند الشدائد حاجته. وأزم فيما عندك رغبته. اللهم أزم سلطانك وعلى مكانك وخفي مكرك وزهر أمرك وغلب قهرك وجلت قدرتك ولا يمكن الفرار من حكومتك. اللهم لا أجد لذنوب غافرة ولا لقضائه ساترة ولا لشيء من عمل القبيح بالحسن مبدلا غيرك. لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك وبحمدك ظلمت نفسي ظلمت نفسي ظلمت نفسي وتجرعت بجهلي وسكنت إلى قديم ذكرك ليمنك علي. اللهم مولاي كم من قبيح سترت وكم من فادهم من البلاء يقلت وكم من إسار وقيت وكم من مكروه دفعت وكم من صناع جميلا لست أهلا له نشرت اللهم عزم بلائي وأفرط بسوء حالي وأفرط بسوء حالي وقصرت بي آمالي وقعدت بي أغلالي وحبسني عن نفعي بعد أمالي وخدتني الدنيا بغرورها ونفسي بجنايتها ومثالي يا سيدي فأسألك بعزتك أن لا يحجب عنك دعائي سوء عملي وفعالي ولا تفضحني بخفي ما اطلعت عليه من سري ولا تعاجلني بالعقوبة على ما عملته في خلواتي من سوء فعل وإساءتي والدوام تفريطي وجهالتي وكسرة شهواتي وغفلتي وكل اللهم بعزتك لي في كل أهل وكل الأحوال رعوفا وعلي في جميع الأمور يطوفا إلهي وربي من لي غيرك أسأله كشف ضري ونظر في أمري إلهي ومولاي أجريت علي حكم تعبت في هوى نفسي ولم أحترس فيه من تزين عدوي فغرني بما أهوى وأسعده على ذلك القضاء فتجاوزت بما جرى علي من ذلك بعض حدودك وخالفت بعض أوامرك فلك الحجة علي في جميع ذلك ولا حجة لي فيما جرى علي في قضاءك وألزمني حكمك وبلاءك وقد آتيتك يا إلهي بعد تقصيري وإسرافي على نفسي معتذرا نادما منكسرا مستقيلا مستغفرا منيبا مقرا مذعنا معترفا لا أجد مفرا من مكان مني ولا مفزعا أتوجه إليه في أمري غير قبولك عذري وإدخالك إياي في ساعة من رحمتك اللهم فأقبل عذري وارحم شدة ضري وفكني من شدي وساقي يا رب ارحم ضعفاء بدني يا رب ارحم ضعفاء بدني يا رب ارحم ضعفاء بدني ورقة جلدي ودقة عزمي يا من بدا خلقي وذكري وتربيتي وبري وتغذيتي هبني لابتداء كرمك وصالح برك بي يا إلهي سيدي وربي أتراك معذب بنارك بعد توحيدك وبعد ما انتوى عليه قلبي من معرفتك ولهج به لساني من ذكرك واعتقد ضميري من حبك وبعد صدق اعترافي ودعائي خاضعا لربوبيتك هيهات أنت أكرم من أن تضي من ربيت أو تبعد من أدنيت أو تشرد من نويت أو تسلم إلا البلاء من كفيت ورحمت. وليت شعري يا سيدي وإلهي ومولاي أتسلط النار على وجوه خرت لعزمتك ساجدا، ولا الألسنين نطقت بتوحيدك صادقة وبشكرك ومادها، وعلى قلوب اعترفت بإلهيتك محققا، وعلى ضمائر هوت من العلم بك حتى صارت خاشعة، ولا جوارح سعت إلى أوطان تعبدك طاعة وأشارت باستغفارك مذعنا. ما هكذا الظن بك ولا أخبرنا بفضلك يا كريم يا رب، يا كريم يا رب، يا كريم يا رب. وأنت تعلم ضعفي القليل من بلاء الدنيا وعقوباتها، وما يجري فيها من المكاره على أهلها، على أن ذلك بلاء ومكروه قليل مقسوم يسير بقاه وقصير مدته، فكيف احتمال لبلاء الآخرة وجليل وقوع المكاره فيها، وهو بلاء تطول مدته ويدوم مقامه ولا يخفف عن أهله، لأنه لا يكون إلا عن غضبك وانتقامك وسخطك، وهذا ما لا تقوم له السماوات والأرض. يا سيدي فكيف بي وأنا عبدك الضعيف الضليل الحقير المسكين المستكين. يا إلهي وربي وسيدي ومولاي، لأي الأمور إليك أشكو ولما من حاجة الجوع وعبك العليم العذاب والشدة، أم لطول البلاء مدتي، فلئن سيرتني للعقوبات مع أعدائك وجمعت بيني وبين أهل بلائك وفرقت بيني وبين أحبائك وأوليائك، فهبني يا إلهي وسيدي ومولاي وربي صبرت على عذابك، فكيف أصبر على فراقك، وهبني صبرت على هر نارك، فكيف أصبر على النظر إلى كرامتك، أم كيف أسكن في النار ورجائي عفوك. فبعزتك يا سيدي ومولاي أقسم صادقا، لئن تركتني ناطقا لأزجن إليك بين أهلها ضجيج العاملين، ولأصرخن إليك صراخ المستصرخين، ولأبكين عليك بقاء الفاقدين، ولأنادينك أين كنت يا ولي المؤمنين، يا غياث أعمال العارفين، يا غياث المستغيثين، يا غياث المستغيثين، يا غياث المستغيثين، يا حبيب قلوب الصادقين ويا إله العالمين، فتراك سبحانك يا إلهي وبحمدك تسمع في صوت عبدا مسلما سجن فيها من مخالفتي، وضاقت أماط بها بمعصيتي، وهبس بين أطباقها بجرمه وجريرتي، وهو يضج إليك ضجيج معملا لرحمتك، ويناديك بلسان أهل توحيدك، ويتوسل إليك بربوبيتك. يا مولاي فكيف يبقى في العذاب وهو يرجو ما سلف من حلمك، أم كيف تعلمه النار وهو يحمل فضلك ورحمتك، أم كيف يهنق لهيبها وأنت تسمع صوتها وترى مكانه، أم كيف يشتمل عليه زفيرها وأنت تعلم ضعفه، أم كيف يتقلقل بين أطباقها وأنت تعلم صدقه، أم كيف تسجله زبانيتها وهو يناديك يا رب، أم كيف يرجو فضلك في إدقه منها فتتركه فيها. هيهات ما ذلك الظن بك، ولا المعروف من فضلك، ولا مشبه لما عملت به الموحدين من برك وإحسانك. فباليقين أقطع لو لم حكمت به من تعذيب جاهديك، وقضيت به من إخلاد معانديك، لجعلت النار كلها بردا وسلاما، وما كان لأحد فيها مقرا ولا مقاما، لكنك تقدست أسماؤك فاقسمت أن تمنعها من الكافرين من الجنة والناس أجمعين، وأن تخلد فيها المعاندين، وأنت جل ثناؤك قلت مبتدعا وتطولت بالإنعام متكرما. أفمن كان مؤمنا كمن كان فاسقا ليستعون. إلهي وسيدي، وأسألك بالقدرة التي قدرتها وبالقضية التي هتمتها وحكمتها وغلبت من عليه أجريتها، أن تحب لي في هذا الليلة في هذه الساعة كل جرم أجرمته، وكل ذنب أذنبت، وكل قبيح أسررت، وكل جهل عملت، كتمت وأعلنت، وأخفيته وأظهرت، وكل سيئة أمرتها بإصباتها الكرام الكاتبين الذين وكلتهم بحفظ ما يكون مني، وجعلتهم شهودا علي مع جواره، وكنت أنت رقيب علي من ورائهم وشاهد لما خفي عنهم، وبرحمتك أخفيت، وبفضلك سترت أن توفر حظي من كل خير تنزل، أو إحسان تفضله، أو بر تنشره، أو رزق تبسطه، أو ذنب تغفره، أو خطاء تستره. يا ربي يا ربي يا رب، يا ربي يا ربي يا رب، يا ربي يا ربي يا رب. يا إلهي وسيدي ومولاي مالك الرق، يا من بيد ناصيتي، عليما بضري ومسكنتي، يا خبيرا بفقري وفاقتي، يا ربي يا ربي يا رب، يا ربي يا ربي يا رب، يا ربي يا ربي يا رب. أسألك بحقك وقدسك وعظم صفاتك وأسمائك أن تجعل أوقاتي في الليل والنهار بذكرك مأمورا، وبخدمتك موصولة، وأعمالي عندك مقبولة، حتى تكون أعمالي وأرادي كلها وردا واحدا، وحالي بخدمتك سرمدا يا سيدي، يا من عليه مؤوري، يا من إليه شكوت أحوالي. يا ربي يا ربي يا رب، يا ربي يا ربي يا رب، يا ربي يا ربي يا رب. قوي على خدمتك جوانه، واشدد على عزيمة جوانه، وهب لي الجد بخشيتك والدوام في اتصال بخدمتك، حتى أسرع إليك في ميادين السابقين، وأسرع إليك في المبادرين، وأشتاق إلى قربك في المشتاقين، وأدنو منك دنو المخلصين، وخافك مخافة المؤمنين، واجتمع في جوارك مع المؤمنين. اللهم من أرادني بسوء فرده، ومن كادني فكده، واجعلني من إحسان عبيدك نصيبا عندك، وأقربهم منزلة منك، وأخصهم زلفة لديك، فإنه لا ينال ذلك إلا بفضلك، وجد لي بجودك، وعاطف علي بمجدك، واحفظني برحمتك، واجعل لساني بذكرك لحجا، وقلبي بحبك متيما، ومن علي بحسن إجابتك وأقل أسرتي واغفر زلتي وإنك قضيت على عبادك بعبادتك وأمرتهم بدعائك وضمنت لهم الإجابة فإليك يا ربي نسبت وجهي وإليك يا ربي مددت يدي فبعزتك أستجب لدعائي وبلغني منايا ولا تقطع من فضلك رجائي واكفني شر الجن والإنس من أعدائي يا سريع الرضا يا سريع الرضا يا سريع الرضا اغفر لمن لا يملك إلا الدعاء فإنك فعال لما تشاء يا من اسمه دواء وذكره شفاء وطاعته غنى ارحم من رأس مالح الرجاء وسلاه البقاء يا سابغ النعم يا دافع النقم يا نور المستوحشين في الظلام يا عالما لا يعلم صل على محمد وآل محمد وافعل بما أنت أهله وصلى الله على رسوله والأئمة الميامين من آله وسلم تسليما كثيرا اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
We have Sheikh Mastani with us. Here. Islamic Sheikh, can you hear me?
Wa alaikum assalam. Yes, brother.
Okay.
Thank you. تقبل الله. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد وآله الطاهرين. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الخطبة الأولى: ومن جهله فقد أشار إليه ومن أشار إليه فقد حده ومن حده فقد عده. Continuing with the first khutbah of Nahjul Balagha, where Amir al-Mu'minin alayhi salam, he really goes all out regarding Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in very short bits, but at the same time in their shortness they are full of meaning and really need to be expanded on. Last session what we had was a very important part of this khutbah where he says whoever describes Allah, ascribes attributes to him, فَقَدْ قَرَنَهُ. What happens is that they have paired God with a specific attribute. And I explained that what is meant by attribute in this context is not the attributes of God, it's the attributes that we're usually accustomed to, that we are usually familiar with. And so what the Imam is trying to say is that, look, when you ascribe certain attributes to God, you're really bringing him down. Now, of course, brothers and sisters, we have no choice. At the end of the day, when I say Allah is Alim, Allah is all-knowing, that ilm that I am attributing to God, my understanding of ilm is very, very limited and flawed and really deficient, falls short of what Allah's ilm is, of course. We have no choice though. This is what it is. The Imam, though, he lets us know at least that, look, don't think you understand God the way he really is. Man wasaf Allah faqad qaranahu. Whoever attributes things to God, then he has paired God with that attribute. Okay, well, what happens? Well, now that package, that combination of God and ilm is your God, right? Because that is how it is with all other attributes. When I say that so-and-so is alim, so-and-so has ilm, so-and-so has knowledge, that doesn't mean that knowledge is part of their essence. That meaning that they could not exist without knowledge. No, there was a time when they were born, they didn't have knowledge. Later on, knowledge came and became part of them. but it can be separate from them and they will still exist. With God, it's different though. With God, his essence is knowledge. You can't point to part of his essence and not find knowledge there. His entire essence is knowledge. Now, this, it gets very theological, very philosophical, but this first khutbah of Amir al-Mu'minin is known for this. And that's why people are sometimes intimidated by this first khutbah of Nahjul Balagha, because they've been told that Imam Ali really goes deep with the short lines that he mentions in regards to Allah and Allah's greatness. But this is what it is, brothers and sisters. What happens is, usually our understanding of knowledge is the same type that we have for other beings. And if it's that type of knowledge, that attribute of ilm and knowledge, when we put it next to God, we have paired God with it now. And when we pair God with it, that package of God and him being knowledgeable, all-knowing, that combination, that package is really God for us. But the Imam, he says, وَمَنْ قَرَنَهُ, when you pair him with something else, then what you've done is you have dualized him. You've made him really two, right? There's God and then there's knowledge. There's two things here now. And when you make two things, when you make God two parts, you've given him parts. Jazza'ahu. So this is what we had last session. And a person who gives who believes that God has parts, then he has jahl of God. Because as the beginning of the khutbah said, Kamalu ma'rifatihi tawheeduhu. If you really want to know if you've understood God, see how much tawheed of God you have in you, meaning oneness. But here, what has happened is that we have jahl of him because we've paired him with others, with other things. Not, of course, knowingly, but it is what it is. That's how we are. And it's fine. There's nothing wrong with it, once again. But we do have to slowly continue this journey to Allah such that Allah eventually blesses us with this, at least a drop of this sea of his ma'rifah, to understand that no, he is everything of his attributes. It's not that he is something and his attributes are something else. They come together to form God. The same way I am myself, and then me and my knowledge, they come together and make me who I am. Yes? All right, so this was a brief recap of last session. Now here it says when you have ascribed parts to him, then you actually have jahl of him. You're ignorant of him. That's not what he's all about. What he's all about is oneness, tawheed. All right, well, what happens when I have jahl of him? The Imam continues. He says, وَمَنْ جَهِلَهُ. Let me pull it up real quick. وَمَنْ جَهِلَهُ فَقَدْ أَشَارَ إِلَيْهِ. A person who doesn't know what God is all about, has misunderstanding of God, will now point to him. Now there's a discussion amongst the mufassirin of Nahjul Balagha. What is meant by pointing to him? Is it physical pointing to him or more than that? And these mufassirin, they've explained that no. What's for sure is there is an intellectual pointing at him, but it can also encompass physical pointing to God as well. Yes? What does it mean? What does it mean that we point to him intellectually? Yeah? What is meant is, what happens when we point at something? Yeah, brothers and sisters, when we point at something, all right, before we point at it, if they ask us, where is it? Yeah, it can be anywhere, 360 degrees around us, whichever way. But when I point in a certain direction, I limit the area in which that thing is. So pointing to something, yes, it's equivalent to that thing being limited. Okay? So here, when it says whoever misunderstands God, whoever has jahl of God, points to him, the Mufassirin have said, not physically necessarily. Points to him means restricts him, limits him in the mind. Now some have said it can also mean pointing physically. But what's for sure is, they say what is meant here is pointing intellectually to him. And when you look at the context as well, you find that, we're talking about God in the mind right now, how we look at him, how we perceive him in the mind. And so it matches the context here, meaning the intellectual pointing, intellectual restricting and restriction of God in the mind. Well, what happens when I restrict him in the mind? I point to him. Huh? What happens? وَمَنْ أَشَارَ إِلَيْهِ فَقَدْ حَدَّهُ. If you point to him, you've given him boundaries. حَدَّهُ, hudud means boundaries. Yes? When you want to, the city limits and the country boundaries of different countries, these are referred to in Arabic as al-hudud. Yeah? The boundaries, the limits of something. City limits. Al-hudud al-baladiyah. All right? So with God, same thing. He says, if you point to him, that means you're restricting him. Restriction equals boundaries, equals drawing lines around him, confining him. Well, what's wrong with confining him? وَمَنْ حَدَّهُ فَقَدْ عَدَّهُ. Amir al-Mu'mineen, I don't know how he does it. The short lines, but very full of meaning here. Man haddahu. If you put a boundary around God and you limit him to a certain area, even in your mind, what happens is that now you have given him a number. Yes? He is number one of something that can have a number two or number three, because when you limit, yes, when you limit something, that means there will be a place where, figuratively speaking, of course, there will be a place where it doesn't exist. That's what limiting someone means. Yes? When I limit something, when there's water everywhere, yes? And then I take some of that water, I bring it to my backyard, I put one of those little pools in the backyard that you can buy, and I pour water in there. Yeah. Now in my backyard I have a little pool of water. What does that mean? That means I've limited the water to that area. What does that mean? That means there's no water outside of that little pool, right? That's what limitation means. That's what fencing things off and gating things off and restricting them means. So when you in your mind have restricted God, when you've restricted him in your mind, that means, even theoretically speaking, he's limited. And if he's limited, that means there are places that he won't be. And that means something else can come and sit there. That something else can be a second example of God, and then a third, and then a fourth, because they're going to all be limited. So it's as if when you limit something, that means you put a number on it. When in my backyard, when I have a pool of water, what does that mean? That means that can be pool number one. I can put another pool next to it. Yeah, those little plastic pools that kids play in, those ones. I can put another pool there and put that, and if that's another pool, that means it's going to be the second pool. And then I can put a third one, I can put a fourth one. Even if I don't put any other pools, and it's just that one pool that's limited, still, that is one pool, meaning a pool that is not two right now, is not three right now, but it can be two, it can be three. Imam Ali alayhi salam says this is against pure tawheed. And this is what's discussed in theology classes, that when we say, and also in the Quran, when we recite Surah Ikhlas, Qul huwallahu ahad, there also the Mufassirin explain how ahad is different than wahid. And you've probably heard this before, that wahid means one versus 2, 3, 4. But ahad means one, not versus 2, 3, 4. One meaning there can't be another one of it, because it's unlimited and unrestricted. Okay. وَمَنْ جَهِلَهُ فَقَدْ أَشَارَ إِلَيْهِ وَمَنْ أَشَارَ إِلَيْهِ فَقَدْ حَدَّهُ وَمَنْ حَدَّهُ فَقَدْ عَدَّهُ. We have a hadith by Imam Muhammad ibn Ali al-Baqir alayhi salam, which also says kind of the same thing that this part of the khutbah is saying. The hadith says, كُلُّ مَا مَيَّزْتُمُوهُ بِأَوْهَامِكُمْ في أدق معانيه مخلوق مصنوع مثلكم مردود إليكم. It's pretty cool, where he says anything that even in your minds you put borders around and you limit, which is almost everything, brothers and sisters, not almost everything, everything that comes within our minds is going to be limited and confined to the boundaries and restrictions of my mind. Very simply put, brothers and sisters, no matter who we are, no matter how philosophical we can think, in the end, if it's in the mind, that means it's limited to the mind. And there's limitation there too. Now, sometimes within the mind, we will cut it up into more parts even. Anyway, the Imam, he says, whatever you compartmentalize in your minds, مَخْلُوقٌ مَصْنُوعٌ مِثْلُكُمْ. No matter how daqiq and precise you do this even. Yes? فِي أَدَّقِ مَعَانِيهِ. You do it as precise as you can. Yet, at the end of the day, you did tamyiz, mayyaztumuhu. And you put borders around it, even if those borders are perfect, that means it's limited. And it is مَخْلُوقٌ مَصْنُوعٌ مِثْلُكُمْ. It is also a creation because it's in your mind. It's a creation, yes, made by you, and it's just like you. مَرْدُودٌ إِلَيْكُمْ, and goes back to you. Yeah. So in other words, it seems what the Imam is saying here is that however much limitation your mind has, that thing that you have confined in your mind will also have those limitations, whether you like it or not. And if that which you have confined in your mind is God, that means God is confined as well, whether we like it or not, because our minds are limited. All right. Now here, as I kind of hinted in the beginning, some have said, oh, does that mean now, because Imam is saying, man wasafahu, whoever describes him, whoever gives him attributes, doesn't know him. So does that mean that we're not supposed to talk about him at all, or not even try to understand a little bit of him? The answer that the scholars will give us is that no, we can get to know him as much as we can, but we have to understand that is still an ilm ijmali. It's a vague knowledge that we have. It is not very precise and accurate. It is not ilm tafsili, so to speak. So that is something to keep in mind as well. We don't want anyone to leave here thinking that, oh, we're not supposed to describe God anymore, speak about God anymore, trying to figure out how he is. Don't go into philosophy and things like that. No, these things help. These things help. Sometimes something is totally blurry. Sometimes it's a little blurry, but it's not 100% blurry. It's 50% blurry. That's better than nothing. Yeah. And so with God, the same thing. But once again, we have to keep reminding ourselves, as the Quran does, as Imam Ali is doing here, that don't ever think that you got it right, though. He is much higher and more immaculate than what you think. All right. وَمَنْ قَالَ فِيمَا فَقَدْ ضَمَّنَهُ. You get the feeling that Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam, he is a little he's upset about this idea of how people describe God, or actually think about God even. وَمَنْ قَالَ فِيمَا فَقَدْ ضَمَّنَهُ. Yes, which means, and so whosoever asks, what is he in? Fima means what is it? What is he in? Tell me, where is he? Yes, where is he situated? When you're situated somewhere, when you're found somewhere, that place is containing you. Okay, and so here the Imam says, look, when you ask where is he, within what is he? What you've done is you have contained him in something. You have engulfed him in something. This is a problem. The Imam doesn't even say that this is a problem because it's obvious that it's a problem. All he lets you know is that you just contained him in something. He didn't say that containing him in something is problematic. He didn't say that. He just says, hey, just letting you know you contained him in something, and that's a problem. Okay. وَمَنْ قَالَ عَلَى مَا فَقَدْ أَخْلَى مِنْهُ. And whoever says, what is he situated on? Fine. I'm not going to put him in a box. I'm not going to put him in a container. I'm not going to put him in a place. He's the king. He's the God. He's probably sitting on a throne or something. Where is he sitting on? What's the problem with that? Amir al-Mu'mineen, tell me. وَمَنْ قَالَ عَلَى مَا فَقَدْ أَخْلَى مِنْهُ. He says that whoever asks that where is he sitting, where is he situated on, what is he situated on, what they've done is that they have made other places devoid of him. When you can ascribe God being on something to God, what that means that is that he's not under that thing either. Yeah? When he's on top of something, these are relative terms. When something's on top of something, that means it's not under it, it's on top. Well, when you say where is he, on what is he situated? On what does he exist? If you ask such a question, then you are implying that there are other places he's not, which is under. Yeah? And so on. Now, someone here might say that, okay, but we have a verse in the Quran. Oh my God. And we have a verse in the Quran, Ar-Rahman, ala al-arsh istawa, Surah Taha. Yeah? Ar-Rahmanu ala al-arsh istawa. Allah is sitting on the throne or settled on the throne. See, we have a verse that says God is on the throne. And so, what do you say about that? And this is something that you'll be interestingly find that there are some theological schools of thought that might believe that God is actually sitting on a throne. But I think it's pretty clear the answer to this question. It's pretty clear that if the Quran speaks of God being on a throne and ascribes being on something to God, it is metaphorical, and what it is trying to signify is God's sovereignty and God's rulership, yeah, and the fact that his command goes over everything else, yeah. Throne, the throne of God equals God's power, God's authority, and so on. Just like when it says, the Quran says God has a hand, just when it says that God will be coming on the day of judgment, وَجَاءَ رَبُّكَ وَالْمَلَكُ صَفًّا صَفًّا, your Lord will come. What does that mean? He'll come. Yeah? Or he's being carried on something that the angels might be carrying. What does that mean? That means like God is not here and he is to be brought, or he is to arrive. No, these are all metaphorical, brothers and sisters. These are the verses that the Quran says have to be understood in light of other more definitive, more decisive, clearer verses. These are metaphorical. Okay. وَكَائِنٌ لَا عَنْ حَدَث مَوْجُودٌ لَا عَنْ عَدَمٍ. When we, as limited human beings that are ممكن الوجود, we get our wujud and existence from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When we talk about existing, this exists, that exists, what we mean is that yes, right now it exists, but in the past it might not have existed. That comes along, that baggage comes along anytime we use this word of existence and we ascribe it to anything out there that is not God himself. Anything, no matter how small it is, the ant, no matter how great it is, the planets, the galaxies, whatever it is, if it exists, existence is not part of its essence. It is not part of its definition. So it didn't exist before, and then it was given existence later. Okay. And so Imam Ali here points out that if you're going to say God exists, that's fine, and that's true. But just know that this existence of God is not out of hadath. Hadath means something that takes place. When something takes place, that means it wasn't there before, and then it came into existence. Yes? When we say this took place, that took place, it means it wasn't there and then it happened. Ka'inun. Ka'in comes from kaun, existence. He exists, but not because of a hadath. Not that it took place that he existed. No. Don't say it like that. And understand that it's not like that. Now, we won't understand this completely. We won't experience it. We won't grasp it completely because we, as I said, we are only accustomed to the conventional usage of the term existing, which usually is preceded by sometime is preceded by non-existence of something, right? So be careful of that. Be aware of this idea. Be aware of this, be aware of this notion that, look, God exists, but not like everything else exists. Just like he's not one the way other things are one, but he's one in another way. He's uniquely one. Here also he exists, but uniquely exists, unlike everything else that's mumkinul wujud. Mawjudun la an adam. So there we talk when we said la an hadath means there wasn't a time that he didn't exist. At the same time, we have mawjudun la an adam, the Imam says. That means that look, he's not preceded by nothingness either. Now these two are intertwined with each other. These two um, uh, lines right here. Ka'inun la an hadath, mawjudun la an adam. Yeah. Sometimes the matter, the material for something to exist is there, but the thing itself is not there. So for example, you have wood, but you don't have a table. Okay? You have the meat, but you don't have the nahari. Okay? So this nahari didn't exist before, but we used the material to make that, and so now we have nahari. Okay? Now we have table. Table didn't exist before, but the material needed for it was there. To get rid of this idea, the Imam says, Mawjudun la an adam. He exists, but he doesn't exist like, oh, the table didn't exist, but but the material was there. So God, might have been there, but like the matter for him was no. He didn't come. He at the end of the day, that table that comes from the wood. The question is, where did the wood come from? It came from tree. Okay. If it came from tree, where did the tree come from? This will go back. The question of where did it come from will keep going back until it reaches Adam, reaches nothingness. There has to be a point where from nothingness, the matter and material came into existence. Okay? Now here, the Imam makes it clear. With God, two things. It's not that God didn't exist because the matter was there, but he just didn't exist. No, and it's even more than that. He's not existence that is preceded by non-existence even. Yeah. None of this stuff there is accurate about him, is true about him. When we say the table didn't exist, but now it exists, two things can be meant here. The table didn't exist, but the matter for it was there. Or the table didn't exist, and there was nothing else that existed either. And then out of nothingness, it came into creation and came into existence. Both of these understandings of something not being there and then coming into existence, they don't apply to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Imam Ali is reminding us. This next one is a little bit of a favorite of mine. And I think, we're not going to do justice to this line, I think. And I think this is something that philosophers will have to talk about more. But let's see how good we can do, how much we can get covered. مع كل شيء لا بمقارنة وغير كل شيء لا بمزايلة. مع كل شيء. He is with everything. Okay, let's start talking about wahdatul wujud a little bit. Very briefly, okay? Nothing crazy. This is not a philosophy / irfan class. And I'm not a person to talk about it either. But there are different, this idea of wahdatul wujud, which is unity of existence, oneness of existence, which some will take it all the way back to wahdatul mawjud, which is oneness of the existent. Here there are different ways of explaining and understanding this concept. Okay, this philosophical / irfani concept. There are some who believe that there's only one thing out there and everything else is just a mirage, as if. Okay. Now, here, Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam, when he's talking about God, look what he acknowledges. The wording that he uses, does it imply that there's only one thing out there and nothing else exists? Or no, he acknowledges our existence and all of the existence of the mumkinat, but at the same time acknowledges God's existence and tries to explain the relationship between these two. The wording we find is like this. He doesn't say he is huwa or la shay'a illa hu wa ghayru kulli shay'in la bimuzayala or something like that. He doesn't say that he is everything, or yeah, huwa kullu shay. He is everything. He is everything. He doesn't say it like that. He says ma'a kulli shay. He is with everything. When something is with something else, you are acknowledging the duality there. Yeah, but at the same time, when he's with everything else, la bimuqarana, not by pairing or being next to it. Being with everything, but not next to it. Not next to it. What does that even mean? Okay, what does that even mean, brothers and sisters? I want us to think about it, right? Even after this session, you can think about this. You know, on your way to work, on the train, while you're making nahari at home, whatever it is. It's something to think about. When you're with something, what does that even mean? That always means that you have two things next to each other. Yeah, and in close proximity. But here the Imam, he says he's with everything, but without being next to it. La bi muqarana. Yeah. All right. So that's one thing to think about. Okay, if Allah is with everything, but He is not next to them, does that mean that He's one with them? That they're all one? وَغَيْرُ كُلِّ شَيْءٍ. But He is also, at the same time that He is with everything and not next to it, He is also other than everything. Think about it. He is other than everything else. That means God is one thing and the rest of things are something else. So the Imam is acknowledging the existence of everything. Now, of course, once again, philosophy, irfan, these things might, these disciplines, they might conclude that Amir al-Mu'minin here is just, speaking to the average person, and he doesn't want to go deeper to confuse people more, whatever it is. But right now, we're looking at the wording, and this is what the wording is saying, okay? Which is pretty cool, actually, which is pretty nice. Even this goes a long way, I would say. Just like that verse in the Quran that says, وَمَا رَمَيْتَ إِذْ رَمَيْتَ وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ رَمَى, that you did not throw, O Prophet, when you threw, but Allah threw. Okay? But Allah threw. Over there, it is both attributing throwing to the Prophet and negating it from him at the same time. So I love it when the Quran does this. I love it when the literature that we have does this. Okay, so here the Imam said he's with everything. Okay, does that mean that he's next to everything? No, not being next to everything, but he's with everything. Well, when you're with everything, but you're not next to it, that means you're in it. You're part of it. You're one with it. Is that what it is? غَيْرُ كُلِّ شَيْءٍ. But he's other than everything else at the same time. He is not this thing, that object, that thing. No, he's not. Okay, then he's separate from them then. La bimuzayala. Not by separation though. What is going on? What's going on here? Four antithetical terms and oxymorons all over the place here. What we have in these 4 words, mashallah. It's beautiful, actually. It just shows that we can't understand God the way He really is. The Imam, one more time I'll say, he says he's with everything, but not because he's next to it. But at the same time, he's not everything. He is other than everything else, but not because he's separate from them. Because usually, when something is other than something else, that means you can separate them from each other. Right? If they are within each other, they're not 2 things anymore. They become one thing. If you merge 2 things into one, it's one thing. It's not 2 things anymore. So as you can see here, brothers and sisters, the relationship between God and everyone else and God and us is a very, very special, intimate relationship, very unique relationship that God has with all of His khalq. And this is why He has knowledge of everything. It's not like they're bringing Him a book every day, reports every day of what's going on in the world, and God reads it or something. No, 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 no. He is with everything, but not one with everything, but not separate from everything. وَنَحْنُ, if you want to sum it all up in one word, in one verse of the Quran, وَنَحْنُ أَقْرَبُ إِلَيْهِ مِنْ حَبْلِ الْوَرِيدِ. We are closer to you than that main artery of your heart. Yeah? Does that mean that He's in our chest? No. It's trying to say that, look, everything of you is in our hands, but you're not going to find us in there either, but we are in there at the same time. Something like that. I think it's beautiful. فاعل لا بمعنى الحركات والآلة. You know, what Amir al-Mu'mineen has been doing so far in this khutbah, he's just, I mean it in a good way, but he's just been beating us up, right? Or better said, beating our perception of God up, like beating it up big time, right? For a good purpose, not for a bad purpose. So, for example, when you put iron in the furnace and then you bring it out and you bang on it with that hammer, you are getting rid of all of the garbage that's in it, yeah, and really refining that iron, that sword, right? Right now, Imam Ali, take our idea of God, look at it as a punching bag. Imam Ali really is punching out all of the inaccuracies that we might have of God. And when He's doing this to us, we might not get a clear picture of exactly what He's trying to get at, but we at least understand that we don't have it right. We don't have it right. Allah is greater than all of that. Yeah. It's beautiful. This is the first khutbah of Nahjul Balagha. I want us to pay attention to that, right? That this is the first khutbah that Sayyid al-Radi has brought in Nahjul Balagha about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's beautiful. I really wish that more and more of the mu'mineen would try their best to familiarize themselves with these concepts. فَاعِلٌ لَا بِمَعْنَى الْحَرَكَاتِ وَالْآلَةِ. He does things. He's a fa'il. A fa'il does actions. Yes, he is actively getting things done and doing them. But لَا بِمَعْنَى الْحَرَكَاتِ, not in the sense of movements and motion by God. No, no, no. God, there is no motion and movement. But how does He get stuff done? If you want to get something done, you have to move. You have to move it. You have to move yourself. You have to move your arms and all of that. You know, and it says He does. He gets more done. Trust me, but not in the sense of movements and motions being part of it. Nope. Wal-ala, and using tools and means to get something done. Yeah. Then how does He get stuff done? Well, His takwini command of kun fayakun, of saying be and it is. Yes, once He brings into existence the material realm, within the material realm, everything is happening with a means. But when Allah is directly involved in something and is actively and directly doing something, kun fayakun, brothers and sisters. End of story. No movement, no motion He has to do, nothing like that. Basirun إذ لا منظور إليه من خلقه. That He is all seeing. But once again, when you say He's all seeing, and hearing and other things also fall in the same category as seeing here. When you say He is all seeing, understand that for you, being to be able to see equals there being something out there to see. Yeah? But if there's nothing out there to see, you're not going to be basir anymore. Imam Ali here, he says, look, Allah is all seeing, but He's all seeing even when there is nothing of His creation to see. There is some explanation here that I would have to give. It'll go very much deeper, I feel, and I don't think it's necessary. But in a nutshell, maybe here one can say that the Imam by saying Basir and Allah being all-seeing, he is using this to represent God's knowledge. Like, look, he is all knowledgeable, even if there is nothing out there to be subject to his knowledge, because you don't need anything out there to have knowledge when you yourself are all of existence. Yes, when you discuss the attributes of God, one of them is knowledge. They discuss, is this knowledge of his dependent on there being other things out there? They say no, because he has knowledge of himself. Knowledge of himself is the highest level of knowledge that Allah can have towards anything. Yeah, the rest of the things out there, they are an extension of his own existence, kind of. All right, I have to be careful with the words that I use because it's a little philosophical, and if misunderstood, can really cause problems. Even when I say extension of his own existence, there's a special meaning I might mean by that. Yeah, and so it's better if even if I don't use these terms, you know. متوحد إذ لا سكن يستأنس به ولا يستوحش لفقده. He is alone. He is alone, but not because there's no one out there to be there for him. There's no means of tranquility out there for him that yasta'nisu bihi, that if he can get close to, then that he'll feel tranquility, and that if he doesn't have access to it, then yastawhish, he's worried, yes, and he's upset. No, he's alone, but not in a deficient way. Yeah. So yeah, sometimes if you think about it, if I was alone, okay, if I was alone, even the word loneliness, being alone, scares a person. But with Allah, it's different. Allah is alone, but devoid of all of these other meanings of being alone, that baggage of deficiency, yes, and having flaws in oneself. If a being is perfect, being alone, just let me say this: being perfect, this is something to think about. Being perfect equals being alone. Think about it. That's something to think about. I'm going to end here. This concludes the third section of the first part of the first khutbah. Now the fourth section of the first part of the first khutbah, the Imam begins speaking about God's creation, how he creates and all of that. And I'm going to leave that, inshallah, for our next session. I think I think we had enough thought-provoking lines in this part of the khutbah in this session. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. And I can see that there are no questions, and I would say that's because everyone had a long day today of ibadah, of dua, and of the day of Arafah. But I'm seeing that we have almost 30 people watching, so alhamdulillah, we have a good turnout as well. So I guess there are no questions. And with that, tomorrow, of course, is Eid al-Adha, and we'll have our program tomorrow as well, and the khutbah and all of that. And tonight is also a dear night. Anyone who does dua in this night, and anyone who's going to have some ibadah, don't forget your brothers and sisters in faith across the world, and here in our city especially. Walhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.